fabulous show.
Alaska.
I heartbeat Alaska.
It's heartbeat. Alaska.
Pull up a chair and enjoy the show.
Hear it from Sitka to Barrow. Gather around for Genie's show. It's the Aleut, the Indian and the Eskimo. It's the Aleut, the Indian and the Eskimo.
Welcome one, welcome all.
Did you know that more Alaskans die by suicide than by car accidents? And the statistics are even worse for Alaska Natives. And recently in Nome, Alaska, a 3-day conference brought hope that perhaps we can bring these statistics down.
This program is sponsored by the University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus.
On part 1 of this 2-part series, we met Dan Carmen and his wife Ethel. Through their eyes, we can see the way life used to be for the Inupiat. They remember a time when suicide was unheard of.
It was during the nomadic times that we lived, that very type of living. Our parents taught us a lot of things on how to assist them in helping them getting food, fish, or marine mammals, and the different types of seasons that we depend on many other types of foods and the growth of foods at that special season of summer.
But then something changed.
With the days that our people live nomadic lifestyles, when the sailing ships from the other states began coming up, it was on the Bering Straits where they would hunt in the springtime for the whale. And it was that time of beginning to exchange different things from the sailing ships and the native people on our coastal areas. And it was the beginning of smoking, drinking alcohol, and certainly it, took the lives of many of our people at that particular time until we began to learn what the effects were for that.
Generations have passed since those first whaling ships began trading with the Inupiat. Huge changes have forever altered the world of these ancient people. These changes have made many aspects of life easier, but something was lost along the way. Then, one winter, something happened in Daniel's village that had never happened before.
Well, as I was growing up in Deering, we had a Japanese person that committed suicide on New Year's, and that was our first, evidence of someone taking their lives. And it was certainly an eye-opener for all of us, even though he was of another descent. But he committed suicide in New Year's, and that was something else that we weren't expecting anything of that nature.
Over the course of Daniel's life, the villages went from having almost no suicide to having one of the highest rates in the world. And Alaska Natives weren't alone. Across Alaska, Canada, and Greenland, suicide began lurking in our villages. Jack Hicks works for the Canadian territory of Nunavut.
But starting in the 70s, in most Inuit jurisdictions, most places where Inuit live, where there previously had been virtually no suicide, we started seeing the rise of this unexplainable suicide of your 18-year-old neighbor, you know, the kind of thing that we see today. So that phenomenon started, I don't know about Alaska, but if we look at sort of the eastern side of the Arctic, started first in Greenland in the 60s and 70s, picked up in the 80s and 90s, and in Canada, the Inuit parts of Canada, it started in the 70s, picked up in the 80s and 90s, mainly among younger men in their late teens, early 20s. Young women attempt suicide as frequently or more frequently, but they use less lethal means.
By the early 1980s, agencies in Nome were scrambling for answers and for help. It was during this time that Dr. Mike Hannigan, a young social worker from Vermont, and his wife moved to Nome. He was looking for a new start, an adventure, but what he found was the biggest challenge of his life.
When I moved to Alaska 20 years ago, Western Alaska had the highest rate of suicide in the nation. When I came here, there were 3 other clinicians. I think I made the 4th clinician coming to Nome. Since that time, Norton Sound Health Corporation, Coeric Incorporated, a number of other agencies have established tremendous services, village-based, community-based, region-wide. I think they're excellent services. There are people, you know, at all levels, all education levels, providing services to people in need. 20 years later, the suicide rate's still the highest in the nation.
Maybe another 5 more?
But the people here in Nome are not going to give up. They're going to try something new.
We have a brief program for you this evening.
Every time we have an individual that commits suicide, it's our family members, it's our children, it's our community members, it's our tribal members.
We're taking up lives. Most Native people, that is not our way.
If we maintain the status quo, we're going to continue to read in the paper about young people killing themselves. We're going to continue to see friends and family in the communities suffer tragedy after tragedy. So we need to do something differently. And it's not that we haven't had conferences before, it's not that we haven't tried before, and we've done a lot of good work, but here's a fresh start, and we're hoping to re-energize our efforts.
You see, this unexplainable increase in suicide in Native communities isn't limited to Alaska or Canada or Greenland or even North America. It's worldwide. The Suicide Conference in Nome brought together experts from Australia, New Zealand, Israel, Nunavut, and Alaska. Dr. Annette Beautrais from New Zealand is an expert on risk factors. She was able to arm the mental health professionals here with solid facts from her years of research. Solid facts that will help these people save lives.
Something called the population attributable risk. And very simply, that just tells you what fraction of suicides you might be able to prevent if, in theory, you could eliminate a particular risk factor. So this tells us that if it was possible for us to eliminate all depression and all mood disorders, we could, in theory, eliminate or reduce suicidal behavior up to 57-60%. If we were able to eliminate substance use disorders, we could reduce suicide by almost a third.
I attempted suicide. It's been quite a while. To me, it was the darkest days of my life when I tried to commit suicide.
One of the most powerful moments in the conference was when 6 people who had attempted suicide in the past told their stories.
I went to sleep with a shotgun. I tied my arm
or tape my arm to a double-barrel shotgun, hoping for a twitch during the night. I did go to sleep, and when I woke up in the morning, I said, uh-oh, I didn't succeed, and I pulled the triggers because I thought it didn't go off, and it did go off, and next thing I had the cops there. About a year later, I had a .357 handgun, and I put a bullet in there, and I pulled the trigger, put it up to my head, pulled the trigger, and the bullet didn't go off. So here I am today.
Dana Pictou helped put into words what it feels like to be without hope.
The only way that I think that I can really describe that is when you're in that position, when you're, I know when I was looking at committing suicide, it was like the hope of anything was, I didn't have any hope whatsoever. It was almost like a big void, lack of family, the lack of my self-esteem. It was just to a point where I didn't have anything, or I felt, I should say, I didn't feel like there was anything worthwhile to be in the whole universe. I just wanted to be gone, and I didn't even think about what the effects would be to all the other people. I just didn't care, and I did feel like I was disassociated from my whole spirit. That was unbelievable. Like, I didn't feel like I had a spirit any longer.
More people die in Alaska from suicide than any other injury-related death. With Alaska Natives, our suicide rate is 4 times the national average. But across the board, 8 people die a month in Alaska of suicide. Some of those are Native people.
The news doesn't cover suicides because they don't want to glorify it. They fear that if someone knows they'll be in the news if they commit suicide, it will make them more likely to do it. This is Tricia Sokpiluk-Perry. She's one of the many people across Alaska that's working to turn this trend around. She's a village-based counselor in the Norton Sound region.
And it not only affects the family in the village, it affects the school, it affects the whole community.
The answers to the problems of suicide are as complex as the factors that brought us here in the first place. But one thing that is becoming more and more clear is that changes will have to start in the villages.
In all of our villages, that we really need to do prevention education and distribute and educate the community about warning signs of people that may be contemplating suicide, and that youth and teenagers need to go ahead and tell their parents, if someone had confided in them, that they'll do this instead of holding it in. And we need to be really open and honest about communicating with one another on our feelings.
Our mind can be addicted to the suicidal thought.
Dr. Leora Birnbaum brought perspectives from Israel. She too knows real solutions start with the family.
And so I want to present the Gao family as an example, because in the family we want to work with a family theme. And when we have a suicidal patient in the family, it usually comes in the context of the whole system. Now, I got a very strict education as a family therapist. I would never see a suicidal adolescent on his own, never. If I can help it, that means if the family is alive, I would demand to see the whole family. I wouldn't see the patient at all. It's just my own belief. Because you see, symptoms in the family do not serve only the one who carries the symptom.
So, to date, we've actually screened, that's old data, but we've actually screened up to over 500 Aboriginal youth.
Dr. Tracy Westerman traveled all the way from Australia to attend the conference in Nome. The programs she's involved with are some of the most successful in the world.
I suppose we actually have the only Indigenous specific specialist psychological service in Australia. So we actually work only with Aboriginal Australian people. We actually have enormous rates of suicide risk in Aboriginal populations. So the main focus of our work at the moment has actually been to train community in terms of being able to address suicide in their regions. And we've actually had some fairly good outcomes in terms of what we've been able to achieve in remote and rural communities in particular.
Jack Hicks traveled here from Nunavut, an Inuit territory in northeastern Canada. He came here to learn more about Alaska and Australia's programs. He also brought a powerful example of a successful program from an unlikely place.
The U.S. Air Force ran a very successful suicide prevention program. I don't know what the U.S. Air Force has at the top, a general or something. Guy came in and saw the data on the number of suicides in the Air Force and said this is unacceptable, and simply said this will be a priority of this organization to lower suicide. And what it meant was you've got a culture of sort of tough young men who probably are not inclined to seek counseling, would be very embarrassed if anybody knew they were seeking counseling, and would be very worried about their promotion possibilities if anybody knew they'd ever sought counseling. So the Air Force basically said, there's a lot of resources available for you. There should be no shame whatsoever in getting help to talk about stuff that's bugging you, and there will be no impact on your promotion possibilities if you have sought help. So they've reduced the stigma of getting help, of talking to people, and they substantially reduced suicide in the Air Force.
The Air Force plan did two important things. First, it made help available, and more importantly, it eliminated the bad stigma of seeking that help. The plan made it okay to seek counseling.
I got a couple things I'd like to share. I wish I could add more time, and we all do, because we're talking about a serious thing here. A serious thing about the taking of lives.
One person who knows about healing is Gene Tagaban, a Tlingit from Juneau, Alaska. He blended music, storytelling, and song together.
The taking of lives. Most Native people, that is not our way. It's not our way. We learn from the land. We learn from the earth, the sky, the water, the animals. That is how we learn. And we learn from each other here. You do not see the bear going out and destroying itself. You do not see the eagle or the raven going and destroying itself. You do not see these things happening out there in nature. It is an unnatural thing that is happening. And I know our ways, our native ways, we have ways to deal with these things. I heard some words about grief earlier, about grief. And we have our ways to grieve as Native people. We have our ways to grieve. And we need to do these things.
We're talking about some real heavy issues. It could be not only suicide, but drugs and alcohol, prevention, empowerment. These things are heavy issues. We need to have some humor in it too. We need to laugh.
That's all I know how to do. But I can do it real good.
Laughter is healing. And I mix in not only dance, stories, tradition with some contemporary things also.
Low self-esteem. There you go.
One of the most unique presentations at the conference was when Gene did an impression of his own grandmother. He used humor to make a very serious point.
Yeah, 'cause I told you, I need to heal. I was walking around sour. Just sour. Oh, it was terrible, terrible. Sour, ugly, and bitter. Oh, boy. It was like nails coming out of me. I tried to fix myself. Like force it. Pull those nails out. But it didn't work. Oh, it just made me hurt even more. Oh, so I just used this on my boyfriend now. Oh, just healing. We all need to heal. It was my son, my grandson, he gave me this book. He goes, Granny, you're walking around sour. Oh, sour all the time. He gave me this book to read. Just a healing book. I want to share it with you folks. Because when you've got something, a gift like healing, you need to share it. You just can't put it in the bag and let it go moldy. You got to share it. That's what I'm doing with you folks here. I'm going to share my book. It's called Everyone Poops. An elephant makes big poop. A mouse makes tiny poop. Can you see that okay? One hump camel makes one hump poop. Two hump camel makes two hump poop. Did you know that? Try here, look. Are you okay back there? Oh, different animals make different poops. Different shapes, colors, and smells. I'm going to skip to the end here. It's a long book. All living things eat. So everyone poops. That's all. That's a good book. I was walking around sour. Just had all that stuff inside of me. Oh, it hurt. You know that feeling? Oh, you should. I had to get rid of it. So I went poop. We don't need to carry that stuff with us anywhere. Oh, I was walking around sour and bitter. Oh, but now the world is good. Those shining lights, the sun is out. Share your gifts, and if you see somebody walking down the street, they look sour, and they're in a bad mood, you tell them, you go poop.
The State of Alaska's Suicide Prevention Council just released a new prevention plan. One of the main goals of the plan is to get individuals, communities, regions, organizations, and the government to work together to stop suicide.
1, 3, 4.
But the real key to suicide prevention lies in the community, the family, the individual. For these are the source of our strength as Native people.
I always look into the sky and I can see what's going on in the sky. I look at the stars at night and I use the teachings from the elders use the language, use, you know, if you're a carver, if you're a dancer, if you've been taught all these things, take those really to heart and use them.
Thank you, Mike Hannigan, for your help in making this story possible, and everyone else. Thank you, University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus, for your help in this story. And thank you for watching us. I'm Jeannie Green. Keep watching Heartbeat Alaska. There's more stories coming up, stories that touch your lives. God bless you. We'll see you again next week.
To purchase a VHS copy of this program, have your credit card number ready and call area code 907-563-7440 or mail $20 check or money order to Jeannie Green Productions, 6216 Old Seward Highway, Anchorage, Alaska 99518.
See ya.